Hello, everybody, and welcome to Vinyl Power. That's right, the podcast where we talk about our love for vinyl records and share it with you. Join us each week as we bring you the latest in vinyl releases, what's in our vinyl collection, and wrap it up with epic vinyl. That's right here, each and every week, with your hosts, the Reverend Jeff Kelley and Kurt Harris. Once again, welcome to Vinyl Power. That's right. Thank you, Captain Keats and the Shrimp Shack Shooters, for that rendition of Shrimp Shack. I'll never get over that now that I know what the name of that band was. Hey, everybody, and welcome to the Vinyl Power half hour. Yeah, that's right. That's what we're going to call this thing. I'm the Reverend Jeff Kelley, and over there, that man is Mr. Kurt, the Music Man Harris. And we are here to talk about music, man. Mostly loud, obnoxious stuff that your parents didn't like. But hey, it's 2018, and we've gotten over it. Usually this time of the night, time of the day, we talk about the releases that are coming out. But unfortunately, I still haven't found a website that's don't have every pip farting on a snare drum release coming out next week. So I promise I'm still looking, trying to find that right resource that's going to give us the direct information that we want. But Porcupine Tree has dropped In Absentia as a re-release. Is that correct?
That is definitely correct.
Tell us a little bit about this.
Well, Steven Wilson had gotten the rights back in November for the album Dead Wing, which had not been re-released since the original pressing, and everybody had wanted it. And of course, it was the one I showed last week. I'd finally gotten it. At the same time, he decided that he was going to remaster Dead Wing and put out a better dynamic record than the original. Well, he decided to do the same thing with In Absentia. So In Absentia, probably the most popular Porcupine Tree record of all. He has remastered it, and it was released early this week, and I got the notification that mine was sent from London, so probably sometime next week or sometime shortly after that, I'll have it and be able to play it. And I still have my original copy. I only have the one Dead Wing, of course, but I'll be able to play it against the original and hear the difference between the compression. So a new remaster, and hopefully it'll be a nice experience.
Yeah, you know what else is coming up here real soon is Record Store Day.
Let's talk about Record Store Day.
I went through that list, and there was a good dozen bands that I was kind of excited that they were, releasing something on it. But what was crazy about it were some of the release numbers. Some of them as low as like 1,300.
Yeah, that's right. Luckily for you, you are in a great location. And the location you're in is probably going to get more of an allotment than some other places across the nation. And if you go out on that day and go to a few stores, you may have a better chance to run across one of those rare Record Store Day albums than some other people. Say if you lived in Des Moines or somewhere in Iowa, maybe they get three. But
Legend of the Iowa Corn Boy, we know that guy.
Yes, we do. But in your area, yeah, you might be able to run across a few.
It's funny.
I found a few I really liked in there, and I thought, I'd really love to get out and or at least have maybe one of my buddies take a look for me if he's going to the record store on that day. And
my record store I can go to it a couple of days later, and there will still be Record Store Day records there to buy. I mean, I don't know. I don't understand how people don't just suck them all up. Like I got the Twisted Sister for the Christmas time Record Store Day release, and it was like one of 2,000. And it was still there on the shelf like 3 days after Record Store Day. It was kind of crazy. But if you don't know what Record Store Day is, look it up, because they do them on neat vinyl, and they're they're specific releases for that day. So
Yes,
there
they
can
are.
be an extra track or a hidden track or a different order. You know, they're not really, it's not necessarily a standard studio release. And we were talking about it. That always kind of makes them go up in value almost instantly.
Yes, it does. I completely agree. I don't have many. I only have maybe 5 total in my collection, but each one is different in one way or another. With the with it being a colored vinyl, which is not always my favorite, but it can be pretty cool. It could be a colored vinyl. It can be a numbered copy, like you say. Maybe it's only 1,300 or 2,500 copies, and you get a numbered. Might be a little certificate in there that said Record Store Day version. And
I
like
even saw that they were re-releasing Back in Black on cassette.
I saw that.
I was angry.
Amazing,
I was
it?
like, yes, I can go get it. Oh, cassette. I still may go get it though. Because my store does,
isn't it?
my store sells records and cassettes, and it's a big store here in a million people zone. So I may go see if I can score a Back in Black on cassette, because I still have some cassettes. I still consider that vinyl. I really do. I mean, it's not records, it's not vinyl records.
Well, it is analog.
It is definitely analog vinyl. And anyhow, speaking of the Record Store Day, why don't you tell us what you were spinning this week there, pal?
Great week in music. As you know, I've almost always brought some kind of theme to the table. This week, I had no theme. It was just grab some records, play some records, and whatever happens, happens. And I started it off with a little band from Nova Scotia, Canada.
Nova Scotia.
I don't know how many people remember this band well, but April Wine. Now, this is a band that actually they actually started in 1969, and they've put out over 20 records. So maybe not the most popular band in the world, but you would know some songs on here because they were. This is probably their best album, and this is The Nature of the Beast. And gosh, this is like 1981. They started in 69. You know, I should have written down what number album this is. I know they had over 20 total. This one hit number 24 on the charts, and that was due to the song Just Between You and Me. I'm sure most people recognize that song from the radio. Sign of the Gypsy Queen, I Wanna Rock. I mean, it was a pretty loaded album. It must be somewhere around what, like album 10 or 11 or something in their catalog. I usually write that down, but I didn't this time. But overall, like I say, from the small area of Nova Scotia, which is probably, oh man, I bet they got about 4 or 5 feet of snow up there right now. They're probably having fun with that nor'easter. But yeah, April Wine, and I was lucky enough to see this band live one time. And you know what? They were great. And it always made me a fan because they were so good in that live show that I got to see. So I started off, like I said, eclectic week, no theme. April Wine, The Nature of the Beast, 1981. And from there, I'm going to break out one of my Record Store Day albums. And it will be Mastodon.
Oh, dude, awesome.
With Crack the Sky. This is 2000. This is from March of 2009. Mastodon, a band that was formed in the year 2000 in Atlanta, Georgia. Definitely a heavy metal band. This is definitely took a turn for the progressive metal here, psychedelic progressive metal. This is their 4th album. It actually reached number 11 in the US, so it charted quite well, and number 34 in the UK, so even across the pond. And being the Record Store Day album, it came in this, kind of nice, it's got a little bit of splatter. It's Crack the Sky, so it's got some clouds in there. You can't see it so much through the plastic.
Oh, yeah, it comes through.
And it's got some clouds, and then you've got nice paper with it, and it's a numbered edition. So speaking of Record Store Day, I thought I would break out with little Crack the Sky. And like I said, a really, really good record. I've got a few other Mastodon records, and amongst my favorites is either this one or the one that came before it, Leviathan, which is actually a musical retelling of Herman Melville's Moby Dick. So you can imagine they're singing about the white whale. And when you get a heavy metal band with a lot of power singing about the white whale thrashing about on some unsuspecting vessels, things definitely start happening. Well, number 3 on my list this week is a relatively, I'm sure, an unknown record. And it's actually, some people call this the Blue Garden just because of the cover. This is the first record by the band Masters of Reality, which I was actually lucky enough to see live.
Sounds like a magician.
Well, you know what? They're actually, they're so much like, if I was to try to put them like a sound of other bands, I would say without a doubt Cream and Black Sabbath together. And I was lucky enough to see this band live here in Charlotte many years ago. God, were they good live. It was just in a little club too. They were so good. It's an excellent album. And you know what? I had always thought they were from Texas because when I saw them live, they came out with cowboy hats and they had cowboy boots and they were throwing down. I mean,
did they have a fiddle?
No, they didn't have a fiddle, actually.
Well, they should have actually been playing in Texas then, because, you know, if you're going to play in Texas, you got to have a fiddle in the band.
And, you know, one of the songs, I believe it's like The Eyes of Texas or something like that, is actually one of the tracks on this record. And it just led me to believe, for some reason, after seeing them and not really knowing much about them at the time, that I was like, oh, cool band from Texas. Well, I can tell you a couple cool things about it. They're actually from New York, actually from Syracuse, of all places. And this was their first record. They came out with a few more records, but this...
Did they live next door to Jaime Simmons?
They did, actually. They speak highly of Jaime.
Yeah, I mean, you know, Gene's first name was Jaime, wasn't it? Or
yeah,
Schmeckel or something like that.
Jaime Schmeckel.
Jaime Schmeckel
Rosenstein. Yeah,
Rosenstein. It was very Jew-like. There was no doubting it.
And as you can see, it is a nice, it is a nice gatefold. And I have to say something. This record is not my original. I did buy this record when it came out new, but this is actually. This record was presented to me from the collection of Mr. Boo.
Mr. Boo.
Yep. So this is directly from the Mr. Boo collection.
Thank you, Mr. Boo.
With 34 brought this to me, and I have to say, Mr. Boo was the drummer in many of the bands for my friends Tony and with 34 throughout the years. Unfortunately, rode a Harley. You could have met a cooler guy. Rode a Harley all over the place, and just a real interesting character, as you can imagine by the name Mr. Boo, which he had tattooed on his arm. And unfortunately, Mr. Boo had passed away. And my original album collection was gone. And with 34 brought this over, and he said, I'm sure, because Mr. Boo knew how much you love this record, that he would want you to have his to replace your old one. So directly from the collection of Mr. Boo to me.
In memory of Mr. Boo, may he rest in peace forever.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. And that's basically what I was listening to during this week. Like I said, not really a week of themes, just a week of joy. And so I have to ask you, Jeff, what records were you putting on here in this March and on the western side of the country, avoiding all this nor'easter garbage that they've got going on over here?
Oh, we're getting it too. Don't get me wrong. Yeah.
How are you?
Well, the mountains are. We're not getting it here in Sac. We got a lot of rain and cold and wind, and we had wind advisories for 2 days, 50, 60-mile-an-hour winds. But the mountains are all snowed in. Like, you can't get up over the pass. Tahoe got like 6 feet. The Donner Pass got like 9 feet across 2 days. People were literally only driving 60 minutes outside of Sacramento up I-80 and finding 3 feet of snow and going sledding on the side of I-80. They were pulling over on the side of the interstate, crawling over the guardrail and going sledding into unknown conditions.
So that's quite a storm then, from west to east, all the way across the country, no doubt.
I mean, can you imagine putting your child in a sled and pushing him down a hill that you don't know where that hill goes or what's under it? Look, honey, it's full of snow. It's safe. Yeah, it's safe.
Don't eat the yellow snow where the Huskies go.
That's what they say. But Il Reverend here, he was spinning epicness because it was his birthday.
Well, we got to like that.
for his birthday, he wanted to sit around and listen to some Iron Maiden.
Perfect choice.
Yeah, the very first one that came back up in my collection, of course, was The Number of the Beast. Now, The Number of the Beast was the third album released by the English heavy metal band. And don't call them rock. Don't call them hard rock. They are truly one of the innovators of heavy metal, as much as Metallica was. Released 1982. Sorry, I'm such a Maiden head that I just get sick and tired of people not giving them the credit that they're due. The first release to feature the vocalist Bruce Dickinson after their last with the drummer Clive Burr. It was considerably critical and commercial success. Was a landmark release for the band. Yeah, that's right. March 22nd, 1982. The old Reverend here was 9, and we got concert tickets the moment they got available. Can you imagine the horror of my mother when I come home with my Uncle Jimmy, who says, "Hey, I just bought the boys tickets to see Iron Maiden on the 13th of the month. I'll come by and pick them up. Don't worry about it." Absolutely horrified on Mom's look. It absolutely was. Coming up next, right after that one, was Peace of Mind. The fourth followed right behind it. We went and saw this. We went and saw this tour as well. It was all about Eddie. I mean, the tours really were. I know you've been to some of the tours, and they really, when they finally would reveal Eddie for the tour for the concert, man, it was. He was front stage everything, you know. The band played and descended around him and ran in between his feet. I mean, the Peace of Mind tour was a whole lot of fun. Released 1983, capital in Canada and the U.S. December 1982, Clive Burr ended his association with the band due to a personal tour schedule problems and was replaced by Nico McBrain. That's right. That's right. Previously of the French band Trust, and as
Great
well
drummer,
as,
though.
Oh yeah, dude. I mean, you can't deny that bands evolve.
Exactly.
You know, and there's nothing wrong with. I like Sammy Hagar and Van Halen. You know, I like it. I loved Iron Maiden no matter what in what configuration they've been in. I'm not that much of a snob.
And in fact, that tour, the times that I saw Iron Maiden, that was probably my favorite tour I ever saw, was Peace of Mind with Iron Maiden.
It was such a good album that you couldn't really, you know, it wouldn't really matter how badly they played, because they were a bunch of alcoholic jackasses in the 80s. I mean, we know that. They all were. But I mean, by the end of the night, at least they could get through their pieces, unlike, you know, a lot of the bands we know.
Well, towards the end of the show, when Bruce Dickinson ran up this scaffolding and he was standing over the top of Eddie, and he grabbed the top of Eddie's head and opened it, and he reached in with his mouth and bit out Eddie's brain. He had the brain in his mouth. I think I.
And it was gooey. It was dripping with
great
stuff. I mean, it was.
Oh, it was so good.
Yeah, it was. It was absolutely such a fantastic time.
It was a lot of fun.
Followed that one up with Iron Maiden's The Last Frontier. Now, this was the album that was created specifically for the Star Trek movie of the same name in 2010. It really, it's a double album, and it's every bit the Iron Maiden album it should be. Yes, the cuts were actually created directly for the movie, but the album itself, much like Journey's Tron,
yes,
stands on its own without the movie. You don't even need a reference to Star Trek to enjoy, you know, any of the pieces that are on here. You know, Satellite 15, The Final Frontier, El Dorado, Mother of Mercy, Coming Home, The Alchemist, I can't even pronounce that. Sorry, my eyeballs are bad. Starblind and The Trailsman. The point being is they're all just solid, hard-hitting songs that Iron Maiden that you would expect.
I've listened to that album, but I've never owned it, and I really need to add that one to my collection. I know that's a really good record.
It really, really is. So that's what the Reverend was jamming to on his birthday, was the Iron Maiden, man, and it was a whole lot of fun. Hey, speaking of a whole lot of fun, we got some people hanging out in the chat room out there. Let's go see who they are. Hey there. Hi there. Ho there, neighbors.
Hi there. Ho there.
Rod Dupree, of course, he's always in the house. How you
Always
doing there, sir?
In the place to be.
Ken! Every day, man. Every time. How you doing there, buddy? Glad you're joining us. Win34, how you doing, pal? So glad you're out there watching as well with Mr. Boo's donation.
Yes,
that's
absolutely.
such a good story.
Yes,
Lance Windsor, Zor. How you doing, pal? I know you're getting it worked out. It's all good. Christopher, make sure you eat your vegetables. Dip them in some ketchup and some cheese, and you'll be okay.
Yeah, put that broccoli and cheese, man.
It's put that broccoli right in the cheese head. Just crunch it on down. You'll never even know it was broccoli, I promise. Well, that, my friends, is who is hanging out in the live chat. Hang out. If you want to come see us, we are here Thursdays, 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern. That's 3 hours difference for you people that don't know how to do the math. But it's the same time.
Yes, it is.
How's that possible? Time travel.
Back to the future.
That's right. Back to the future. Speaking of Back to the Future, my friend, what in the world did you bring for your epic record?
Well, in my epic record, I went ahead and cranked up the DeLorean, hit 88 miles per hour, and went back to 1976.
Where we're going, we don't need roads. Boston!
And when you say epic record, well, look right there. Epic record. And this would be the, and I've talked about the Friday music editions before. This is the Friday music edition of the record. And yes,
I'm not sure I remember what the Friday edition actually means. Well, forgive me. I may have wandered when you were talking about that.
Well, there are companies that do some work on the records. They may do a remaster, they do a remix, but they certainly do a repressing onto a more heavyweight, more silent vinyl than the original vinyls.
Yeah. Okay, now I'm up to speed.
Rhino Records quality.
Yeah. Gotcha. Sorry, I just lost track of where I was there for a moment, but I'm back.
And unfortunately, Friday, although they do an amazing job, they tend to be a little on the high side. These usually run right around $30. Yeah, around $30. So a little much. Now, do you get everything that you should get? Of course, you get the gatefold with the original picture inside.
I didn't know the Bee Gees were in Boston.
And who is that right there in the middle? Well, that would be the drummer by the name of Sib Hashian. I've always thought that was great, man. With the oh wait, I got to show it again so you can see it a little better. But the Sib Afro.
Yeah, dude, that's amazing. It's almost like Loverboy, four white boys with afros.
But this album, I don't know what you can really say about this album in terms of the impact that it had when it landed, because this was an album that every single song was an FM radio staple throughout the 70s. Of course, More Than a Feeling. I mean, what can you say about that? And that's a great cover. I mean, I think everybody has to say that's a cool cover.
I think all the Boston covers were just neat.
They are cool. They're all good covers. And it took them forever to put out their next record, Don't Look Back. People are like, God, when are they ever going to put out another record? And it's a good record. This one definitely stands on its own, though, in many ways, although the records that came after it were fine. But, when you look at the fact that a lot of the music on this record was written at different times. And I think that's interesting because when you listen to it, it's such a cohesive record. You would think that a band sat down in a studio and put this together. And the song Foreplay was actually the first song written. It was written as part of something else, and it was written years before this album was actually put together. And I think you can't really talk about the epicness of Boston without talking about, honestly, the epicness of Tom Schultz himself. I mean, an MIT graduate,
right?
A guy who went to work for Polaroid and was
141 IQ,
right? And built this amazing
Sort of like Dolph Lundgren, he's like a scientist.
Right. No, he is. He's like an actual rocket scientist.
Yeah, he's like literally like he's more qualified to tell you about genders than Bill Nye is.
No, absolutely. He's like a rocket scientist. And what you think about when you think about Dolph Lundgren is, I must break you.
Right.
But yeah, the guy's like a super brain. And Tom Schultz is the same way. And Tom Schultz put together an amazing recording studio in his home, and the record company did not want them in that recording studio. And they had to basically cheat and cajole and lie and everything else to get out of playing in the studio that the record company wanted them to be in and get into Tom's custom studio. And obviously it was well worth it because, when you listen to this record, you hear sounds like with the guitars and all the way the guitars are recorded, certainly that sound different than we've ever heard before. And this was in 1976 at the height of the disco era. Also basically at the height of the progressive rock era. So you had, bands like Yes and Genesis, at the height putting out, some of their best albums they'd ever put out. And here came this record, which was just pure kind of pop rock and roll. But every song was catchy and melodic and easy to listen to. And it had a sound all its own. And that was definitely thanks to the genius of Tom Schultz. Whether you're a huge fan of the Boston sound or not, they had their own sound. And I think that's good. And we've talked about, we both love debut albums.
Right.
And,
I'm a fan of studio debut albums.
Right. And this was a band that, when this album dropped, they knew what they were going to do. They worked hard to do it exactly the way they wanted to do it, not what the studio wanted. And the results.
Be like the Bloody Beatles. Do you know how rich the Bloody Beatles are? John Lennon got shot because he was too bloody rich.
Well, that's exactly right. And again, and you can't discount the fact that when you open this and see this picture, in the middle, wearing an afro, is Sib Hashian. And that, my friends, is the key to success. Find a drummer named Sib Hashian who wears an afro.
Giant afro, that's
right.
And
so that was my epic record for this week. And I had to ask you, Reverend Jeff, you've given us an amazing blast of Iron Maiden here in March, and
there's one more.
What epic record you might have for us tonight?
Well, the wife increased my Maiden epicness. The one and only. Here, let me lift this thing up. It weighs like 5 pounds. The 180-gram reissue of Iron Maiden Live After Death double album. Four sides. Both albums are 180 grams each, so they didn't cheat me and make 90-gram albums and and do it that way. They are just amazing. The intro to Churchill's speech, followed by Aces High. 2 minutes to midnight. The Trooper Revelations, Flight of Icarus was all on side one. I mean, seriously. Live After Death is the live album, October 1985, Capitol Records in the US. The video version of the concert only contains footage from the Long Beach shows and was reissued on DVD for February 2008. The Iron Maiden's World Slavery Tour began in Warsaw, Poland on 9 August 1984. It lasted 331 days.
What a tour.
Touring. 187 concerts were performed to tie the 1984 album Power Slave. These guys loved to tour. The tour stage show adhered to the ancient Egyptian theme, which was decorated with a sarcophagi and an Egyptian hieroglyphics and a mummified representation of the band's mascot, Eddie. That's right. I remember Eddie was all mummified up. They had him puppet. He was on puppet strings. He could actually move around. It was absolutely fantastic. You can't. We flipped this just side for side for side. I mean, the one thing that I did notice though, not all of the pieces. Some of the songs were recorded in Long Beach, while others were recorded in Warsaw. On side 2, the Number of the Beast really turns out to be a horrible recording. I don't know. It's not my player because I checked it. Like, I was like, God, that sounds like crap. What's wrong with that? And I got up and I looked at it and then I replayed it. And no, it really is. It's over modulated. It's just a bad edit job is what it is for the release on this. However, everything else was just phenomenal. It's really the only complaint I can give it. Gatefold. There's extra literature inside of it that I haven't even looked at yet. There's whatever this thing is, it's got several
concert pictures. Sweet.
Yeah, several pages, and I mean there's all kind of stuff in here that I literally just broke the cellophane on it today to listen to it. So I'm really excited to kind of break it all open and listen to it tomorrow. But that, my friend, is exactly what I was doing.
That qualifies as
it does. And listen to that. It's the Incredible Hulk sad walking
music.
Time to wrap up this edition of Vinyl Power. But hey, we'll be back next week. You know, we really will. 5 p.m., 8 p.m. Eastern. You can find us on Facebook at Vinyl Power Podcast. That's all you have to do is type that in, hit enter, boom, and you click on that link and it'll take us right here to our page. You can like it, you can bookmark it, you can click the subscribe button, hit the little bell so you know when we're on, come back and watch it later, you know, whatever the case may be. We want to thank everybody for being here, and we always give the same advice: keep your vinyl off the floor. I want to be on one of those spaceships leaving, especially if that's Earth.
Let's build one and go.
You know, if that's Earth exploding, Boston, take me with you.
Take me away.
Calgon.